You know, I've been critical of the weak opposition to the left agenda by the previous government. I mean, I think it left them in no man's land, and I'm disappointed to say that in opposition, there are still too few in the coalition prepared to speak against the hard left policies of the Albanese government. One chap who has been courageous enough in government and in opposition is National Senator Matt Canavan, who's been butting heads today with Chris Bowen over Bowen's more crazy green schemes. Delighted to say that Matt Canavan joins me now. Senator Canavan, congratulations for sticking up for common sense in the face of crazy green policies over so many years. But what exactly has the government proposed today?
Well, Cory, they're proposing a new carbon tax on cars, on internal combustion engine cars. So if you like your car, if you like getting around via the amazing technology that is fossil fuel-based internal combustion engines, the new Labor government wants you to pay more for that privilege. Apparently, it is a privilege for us now, not a birthright. What this will do is set a standard, a carbon emissions standard, and then any cars over that amount, any cars with emissions over that amount will have to pay more. Now, Chris Bowen actually says today, he says in the Australian Financial Review that he's going to introduce penalties on internal combustion engines to deal with what he calls the cost of living crisis for Australians in affording cars. I mean, what sort of world are we in now where we impose penalties to address the cost of living? What I think Chris is getting at is saying electric cars are too expensive relative to traditional cars. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the traditional cars more expensive. They're going to go up here, and that will make everything more affordable in the Labor logic. That's the Labor logic. And this was not disclosed to us before the election. There was no talk about this. But now we've got a Labor Green government and there are no refunds.
Well, I got to say, your comments taking him to task over this seem to have set the Environment Minister, Chris Bowen, off. Here's what he had to say.
Is this a carbon tax?
No.
And why didn't you take it to the election?
Well, we made clear we'd develop an electric vehicle strategy in office, and that's exactly what we're doing. And that sort of cheap, you know, I've seen a senator from Queensland out today saying this will end the utes. I mean, Australians are over that sort of cheap, dishonest, pathetic sort of politics. We're consulting, we're getting on with the job.
Can you just explain why it's not a carbon tax? Sorry, just
because it isn't.
Senator, you've become the name that he won't even dare utter because you're the only bloke holding him to account. How do you respond to that?
I'm happy to be Chris Bowen's Voldemort anytime, Cory, but he thinks he protests a bit too much. This is a tax. In fact, as I said, the Australian Financial Review said as much on Chris Bowen's comments that this is about putting on a penalty on inefficient cars. Now, when the government puts a penalty on something, that's a tax because you're going to have to pay more for it. So, you know, while this week Anthony Albanese, all he can talk about is Scott Morrison and the various letters that he had between himself and the Governor-General years ago, his Energy Minister is slipping through this new carbon tax on people buying a new car. And you've got to wonder, where is the Prime Minister on this stuff? He doesn't talk about this stuff. He barely says anything anymore about the cost of living crisis that are impacting Australians. This week, we actually recorded the biggest drop in our real wages in history, on record. So the week we've had the biggest drop in Australians' living standards, our Prime Minister has been focused on the previous Prime Minister and the jobs he gave himself years ago. It's about time we get back to focusing on the bread and butter issues that are hurting the Australian people, and putting a tax on people's cars ain't going to help with that.
That's exactly right. Now, before I let you go, I mean, as blokes, one of the great benefits of being a bloke is that we actually don't have to give birth to children. God love the women that do. We would be nowhere without them. But what about this? There are moves to dump laughing gas as pain relief for women in Labor because it could affect climate change. This is utter madness, isn't it?
I can't believe, I could not believe that any of these scientists, the professors here, the Green professors pushing this, I just can't believe that any of them have been, in fact, in a birthing suite for the birth of a baby. I'm not sure if their wives or partners have had kids, but I don't think they've been there, because if you've been there, Cory, like I have, I reckon the worst thing you could do is turn to your loved one when things are getting real and say, look, honey, I know things are a bit tough. I know it's a bit painful, but we've got to think of the climate. What do you reckon? I don't think that would go down too well. You'd probably get a swift kick to the head, rightly so. So this just shows the absurdity of where these guys are at, mate. They become obsessed by one thing, And we saw the dangers of that over the last 2 years when an obsession with COVID led to us doing way over the top responses, which hurt so many people. And now we're at risk of doing the same thing with the climate. They're obsessed with the climate, obsessed with carbon dioxide, and there's no amount of human suffering or other issues that will see them not but go down this one-track mind. It's a really dangerous approach because this is a little bit of a funny story, but the real world impact is people become poorer, can't afford their power bills because of these guys' zealous obsession.
Absolutely, and what great common sense. And to all you fellas out there, if you find yourself in the birthing suite, remember what Matt Canavan has just told you. Shut up about the climate. All right, Matt Canavan, thanks so much.
Shut up overall, actually. That's good advice. Just shut up and,
Wise words
there's nothing
indeed.
you can do.
Senator Canavan, thanks so much for joining me on Bernardi.
Thanks, mate.